So, know that Time Magazine right now is running a big scam on an index concerning municipal bonds. I've been tracking it for a while. It's spot on. And the great thing is that right now we're in the third year. So, depending upon what you're working with, in conjunction with whatever munis you've pegged to that index, this year could be what? Profitable? Leverageable? There are right now online three articles identified as being from Time Magazine between 2012 and 2013 on sex trafficking. And it's focused on Mexico. Talking about a new law that Mexico passed in 2013. It's the first of its kind concerning sex trafficking. That's bullshit. All of this is bullshit. What are the correlations between the dates in these articles and the actual literal multi-part series on prostitution and sex trafficking I wrote in the late 90s? 1999 through 2000. 2001, actually. 1999 through 2001. I'm not sure the actual literal specific year. It was 5 parts total. 4 in a direct series, 1 which was several months later, about 6 months later, discussing what was at the time identified as the first comprehensive anti-trafficking legislation in the United States, which, by the way, was part of a global movement. You know what this correlates with? This correlates with State Department audits on the watch of Hillary Clinton, alleging to discuss whether or not the State Department was compliant with counter-trafficking efforts. They went to Norway for a consult. Nice, isn't it? Did you literally allow for a flip on what I did when I was a newspaper editor? You know, pre getting set up for black ops by the Israelis, literally on site. And then enable it to be connected to this horrendous long-term scheme of intentionally murdering journalists as a way to create big flips on securities globally, using articles I wrote personally, and perhaps articles other people wrote personally around the same time frame. See, I was trying to find something completely different and distinct, but it's literally that consistent. So let me recalibrate. The whole point being, if we're talking about a criminal drug enterprise, then we also have to talk about prostitution. And we're not just talking about poor, innocent, helpless women that are victims, that are kidnapped and forced into sex slavery. Somebody manages them. And it's this management layer that's the biggest problem we have to contend with, especially if the women that are managing are putting themselves in a position where they're covering up for the narco leaders. If they're covering up for the kingpins, including in some sort of queenpin role, where they're directly engaged in managing the women so as to assure that they're compliant with the mandates for whatever the business model is. This is the biggest problem. And especially if they're allowed to use so-called legitimate fronts like social service providers to recruit these women, then we've got an even bigger problem, especially if they are enabling nodes of connectivity for acquisition of drugs, including so-called licit drugs or legal drugs that can be prescribed, paid for by the government even, and then sold for cheap on the street to get more dangerous drugs that go very nicely when you got free distributions of condoms and lube. I'm not even going to talk about the abortions and who's paying for them, right? Because we're all about STD prevention, right? That's part one.